never care so much that someone else can disturb your inner state. That is weakness. People do not respect emotional dependency. They study it. The moment someone realizes your mood reacts to them, the power shifts. Now your behavior starts leaking. You answer faster, wait longer, think harder, notice everything. Now you are emotionally trackable, and people feel that instantly, especially the ones you want approval from, because attachment has symptoms. The one who cares too much is never hard to read. You react too quickly, forgive too quickly, get affected too quickly. One shift in tone, and your entire nervous system starts negotiating. That's the collapse. And once people realize they can affect your emotional state, they stop seeing you as solid. Now they see someone manageable, someone they can calm, disturb, delay, control, without touching them. This is why the person who cares most usually loses first. Not because they are weak at heart, because they handed someone psychological access to their stability. And human beings always behave very differently around someone whose stability they can move. And this is where people completely misunderstand weakness. Weakness is not emotion. Weakness is when another human being gains unauthorized access to your mind. Now watch carefully. The moment someone becomes emotionally important to you, your attention starts behaving differently. Not your feelings, your attention. That is the first collapse, because attention is ownership. And once your attention stops obeying you, you are already losing psychological territory. Now silence interrupts your concentration. A delayed reply changes your mood. A shift in tone follows you into other parts of your day. You are eating, thinking about them, working, thinking about them, trying to sleep, still mentally reacting to something that already happened hours ago. That is not connection. That is cognitive occupation. Most people never notice the exact moment another person quietly moves into their nervous system. But everybody around them notices the symptoms, because now your behavior starts tightening. You become quicker to explain yourself, quicker to repair tension, quicker to abandon your natural rhythm. And the disturbing part is, you think you are hiding it. You are not. Human beings detect emotional instability the same way animals detect hesitation, instantly. Especially people who have experienced attention before. They can feel when someone is internally leaning. And once that happens, your body starts making tiny concessions automatically. Not dramatic ones, dangerous ones. You start editing honest reactions in real time, softening truths before they leave your mouth, reducing yourself before anyone asks. Even your laughter changes. It becomes slightly premature, slightly performative, slightly seeking approval. That is why people rarely lose respect all at once. Respect erodes through microscopic behavioral betrayals repeated over time. The body begins negotiating long before the mouth admits insecurity. And eventually something worse happens. People stop interacting with your real personality completely. Now they are interacting with your adaptation, your survival behavior, your emotional preservation mode. That is why overcaring is so dangerous. It slowly replaces your original nature with psychological compliance. If you can understand this level of human behavior, subscribe now, because the next few minutes are going to explain things most people will experience for decades without ever realizing what is actually happening to them. And this is where caring too much stops looking emotional and starts looking humiliating, because now people can read your internal weather, not by what you say, by what moves you, One delayed reply changes your energy. One cold sentence changes your rhythm. One moment of distance, and suddenly your mind cannot stay where your body is. That is when people stop feeling your presence and start feeling your dependency. Listen carefully. Human beings are drawn toward emotional mystery, not emotional certainty. The moment your reactions become predictable, you become psychologically consumable. Now they know what gets your attention, what keeps you waiting, what makes you overthink, what makes you abandon your composure. And once someone understands your emotional pressure points, they stop approaching you carefully. That is the shift nobody notices until respect is already gone. Because uncertainty creates tension. Certainty creates complacency. The moment your attention becomes guaranteed, your value starts becoming emotionally discounted. Once someone fully understands how to emotionally control your reactions, your presence loses psychological weight. Seneca said, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." That quote is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming unreadable in the places where weak people become reactive. Because the unconquerable mind does not give instant access to its internal state. Most people do. That is why they become easy to handle, easy to calm, easy to delay, easy to emotionally manage. And here is the part people experience, but never admit out loud. When someone knows you care more, they stop fearing mistakes. Watch how fast the atmosphere changes. They answer later, apologize less carefully, disappear longer, not always consciously, but instinctively, because they can feel the imbalance now. And the moment imbalance enters a relationship, equality leaves it. Now one person is emotionally anchored, the other is emotionally mobile. One person is protecting the connection, the other is simply participating in it. That changes the emotional gravity immediately, because the person who needs the connection less controls the emotional climate without trying. Not dominance, not manipulation. Leverage. Calm people always possess invisible leverage over emotionally exposed people. And once somebody realizes your emotional state can be disturbed predictably, they begin testing the edges of your stability. Not your words, your reactions. And this is where attachment becomes embarrassing, because now people stop responding to your emotions and start studying them. Watch this carefully. The moment someone realizes your emotional state reacts to their behavior, curiosity appears. Not romance, curiosity. Now they want to see how long silence affects you, how fast distance changes you, how little effort it takes to shift your mood. And most people fail this stage immediately. Not verbally, neurologically. You can hear it in their voice, feel it in their timing, see it in the way their entire personality tightens after emotional withdrawal. One delayed response, and suddenly they are overperforming warmth, over-explaining energy, overcorrecting behavior, trying to recover emotional certainty before it fully disappears. That is the test, not the silence itself. Your inability to remain psychologically unchanged inside it. Epictetus said it plainly. The world turns aside to let any man pass who knows where he is going. Most people misunderstand that quote completely. It is not about ambition. It is about internal direction. Because the person who knows where they are going does not emotionally collapse every time another human being changes temperature. But people who are emotionally dependent always reveal themselves eventually, not through confession, through reaction speed, through emotional acceleration. The moment people suspect your emotional stability depends on them, They begin measuring how much influence they have. And human beings almost never resist influence once they discover they possess it. That is the uncomfortable truth. Not because people are evil, because power changes behavior automatically, especially emotional power. And this is where overcaring starts deforming you. Slowly, quietly. You stop speaking with your natural edge. Stop disagreeing naturally. Stop reacting honestly. Now your personality has to pass through emotional risk assessment first, before every sentence, before every opinion, before every boundary. You begin editing yourself in real time to avoid destabilizing the connection. That is not kindness. That is psychological compression. Fear of loss compresses human beings into smaller versions of themselves. The more afraid you become of losing someone, the smaller your real personality becomes around them. And the terrifying part is, most people do not even notice it happening. They think they are becoming more understanding, more patient, more emotionally mature. No, they are becoming strategically agreeable to protect emotional access. That is why over-attachment is so destructive. It does not just change your emotions, it edits your identity. If this video is exposing something you have lived but never had language for, like the video, because people spend years blaming heartbreak. Without realizing they slowly abandoned their original personality long before the relationship ever collapsed. And this is the stage nobody warns you about. Not heartbreak, not rejection, replacement. Because once you become emotionally dependent, people stop seeing you as a force and start seeing you as available emotional territory. That changes how they move around you completely. Now they do things they never would have done earlier, not because they became cruel, because your reactions removed uncertainty. And uncertainty is what keeps people careful. Watch this happen in real life. At the beginning, somebody notices your moods precisely, remembers details precisely, responds carefully. Then slowly, your emotional availability becomes permanent. Now the effort drops, not all at once. That would be too obvious. It happens through tiny reductions in caution, less explanation, less awareness, less emotional precision. Because people instinctively protect what still feels difficult to emotionally secure. But once your reactions become guaranteed, your emotional value becomes psychologically normalized. That is the shift most people miss. They think, if I care harder, the connection becomes safer. Wrong. Excessive emotional availability removes friction, and friction is what creates psychological tension. That is why some people slowly become invisible inside relationships they once dominated emotionally. Not because they became unattractive, because they became emotionally solved. Epictetus also said, "The world turns aside to let any man pass who knows where he is going." That quote has nothing to do with motivation. It is about emotional direction. Because people who know where they are going internally do not reorganize their nervous system every time somebody becomes inconsistent. Most people do. That is why inconsistency destroys them. Not externally, structurally. One cold interaction, and suddenly their personality starts shape-shifting. Now they are sweeter than normal, more agreeable than normal, less honest than normal. Not because they changed naturally, because fear edits human behavior faster than logic. And eventually attachment begins doing something horrifying. It starts sanding down your original edges. Your sarcasm disappears. Your honesty becomes delayed. Your instincts become filtered. Even your anger becomes strategic. Now every reaction must pass one question first. Will this threaten the connection? That is psychological surrender. The more afraid you become of losing someone, the more your personality starts asking permission to exist. And people feel this, especially emotionally experienced people. They can sense when somebody's identity has started bending around emotional fear. That is why emotionally dependent people slowly become less magnetic over time. Not because they care, because they stopped standing still psychologically. If this video is forcing you to recognize patterns you normally avoid admitting to yourself, like the video, and send it to the person who still thinks emotional self-abandonment is proof of love. Most people never realize they started disappearing psychologically until there is almost nothing authentic left to return to. And this is where everything reverses, because the moment you stop emotionally chasing, people start feeling your weight again, not your attention, your weight. There is a difference. Weak people radiate emotional movement. Calm people radiate control. And human beings instinctively slow down around people who feel internally controlled. That is why emotionally contained people create tension without effort. They are not trying to look mysterious. They simply are not emotionally available on command. That changes the atmosphere immediately. Now, silence does not make them panic. Distance does not make them perform. Coldness does not make them abandon themselves trying to recover certainty. And suddenly, people start watching them more carefully, because emotional unpredictability restores psychological tension. Not games, not manipulation, absence of emotional exposure. Most people leak their entire internal state constantly, through reaction speed, tone shifts, attention patterns, emotional availability. Calm people do not. That is why they feel harder to control. And human beings become deeply attentive around people they cannot emotionally steer. Because this is where most people completely misunderstand attraction, respect, and psychological presence. When your emotions stop chasing connection, your presence becomes heavier. Now your reactions have value again. Your silence has value again. Even your attention starts feeling expensive. That is emotional gravity. And emotionally exposed people lose it completely. Because once somebody knows they can emotionally reach into your nervous system whenever they want, your presence stops feeling solid. Now compare the two energies. One person, instantly reactive, instantly available, instantly affected. The other, grounded, measured, internally unreachable. One feels emotionally consumed by people. The other feels emotionally owned by themselves. And the second person always changes the atmosphere more powerfully. Always. So understand the real lesson here. The problem was never caring deeply. The problem was placing your internal stability in another person's hands and calling it love. That is what destroys people. Not emotion. Dependency. Because dependency changes the way people experience you. It changes your posture, your reactions, your timing, your identity, until eventually you start disappearing psychologically inside your own attachment. The strongest people are not emotionless. They simply refuse to place their inner stability in someone else's hands. That is stoicism, not coldness, not detachment from humanity, internal ownership, the ability to remain yourself even when emotions become intense, the ability to care without psychologically collapsing, the ability to love without becoming mentally possessed by another person's behavior. Because once your peace stops being externally negotiable, people feel it immediately, and they treat you differently immediately. If this video changed the way you understand attachment, watch the next video on your screen right now. Do not stop at one insight. Because these psychological patterns connect much deeper than most people realize. Subscribe if you have not already, and go through the full playlist. Because once you understand how emotional dependence actually works, you start seeing it everywhere.